Hello and welcome to the Daily Conspiracy Podcast. We don't take days off because reptilians don't take days off. And today we're joined by JT follows JC. Thanks for coming back on the show, mate. I can't believe you just said it's been a year since you last come on.
It's been close to that. I think I
Yeah.
want to say it might have been like fall last year.
Yeah, that's wild. It's just wild how time's gone so quickly. How have you
hmm
been in the meantime?
I've been doing excellent. Actually, I was just telling you guys off air that I finally moved to doing this full time. So this was my first starting doing this first week. So I've been kind of grinding at this for the past maybe 3.5 years, 4 years, and yeah, finally I stepped away retired from the day job, but I actually haven't retired. I had two full-time jobs for a while. It was
Yeah.
JT's a reptilian. He doesn't take them days off.
well, I mean, it was definitely one of those situations where if I could have done both, I probably still would have. But something was, let's just say that my day job was not doing as well because I was, your focus is elsewhere, and you know how much time this takes to do this kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
I do the socials too, so I'm making reels and all that kind of stuff, and then trying to promote the stuff that I'm doing. So yeah, I was saying that if I had to choose, I chose this, and hopefully I chose wisely.
I
Well,
am
you
sure
may
you
have not
did.
have chose it. Maybe someone chose it for you.
Yeah, and when I've prayed about this, and I pray that God would open a door. I think when I was first starting on TikTok and not expecting to have people listening to me, I didn't know where it was really going to go. I know last time I was on here, I was probably promoting Ancient Angels, our documentary, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll do movies. But in the meantime, we were promoting it. And I was doing tons of podcasts, and I was concentrating on my own. And I always thought that would be like a natural thing to do because you can't. It takes a lot of time to put into do all the filming and editing and getting something like that out there. But meanwhile, I'm learning things all every day. So you got to talk about it. So, I mean, I think that if I didn't talk about it on podcasts, I would probably go crazy. It'd probably really annoy the people around me. So get in front of a mic, some people like to hear this.
Well, last time you were on, I think we must have been Alien Addict at the time, and I think we was going through the rebranding stage. But I was just saying to you backstage, um, backstage. Who am I? But I was just saying to you that I got into this with Ancient Aliens, and now I'm looking at Ancient Aliens and thinking, are they just making excuses for like what is like a creation on this planet that like who gods have made, or ancient civilizations? Is aliens just something that they threw in there to confuse everybody, including me?
I mean, that was my conclusion because when I look at it, and if you just watch the show, I thought it was pretty interesting. Like I said, I didn't really buy their premises even from the very beginning, but I found the show pretty compelling just because they're asking questions about mysterious megaliths and just weird mythologies and like what does it mean? But if you actually just listen to the mythologies that they're retelling, they're just saying, "Oh, these people really didn't know what they were talking about. They were too primitive to know what an alien was." But I mean, but not really. I mean, like I don't buy that because if you have like really advanced people doing advanced things, and if they were encountering beings from outer space, they would have more knowledge of them than we do.
Mhm.
So wouldn't their descriptions be more accurate than ours?
Yeah.
Because if they're talking about like literally interacting with them, then I think that they would probably have a more true story, more accurate story. Even you go back to like Zechariah Stitchin and translating like the Sumerian tablets. People have taken that apart where his translations are not good, and they never talked about like these gods that they mention never claim to come from other planets. They come from the heavens, So I mean, even if you say they came from the stars, I mean that's still kind of a kind of a biblical, or not even just a biblical concept. It's a religious concept. It's like where are the stars at? They're in heaven, So if they're star people, well, star people in the Bible are angels. So that was always my conclusion, that that some of the gods of these other religions are angels, and they are, even in the Bible, they're called the sons of God. They're called, like the Bible tells you not to worship other gods. It's not because there's not other gods, it's because there are. It's just because they're not, but there's one creator of even those gods. Even lately, I've been really kind of digging into like the Tolkien mythos. Have you guys ever read in like the Silmarillion, or like the Lord of the Rings?
I've not heard of this.
I got as far as reading The Hobbit and then got halfway through Lord of the Rings and that was it.
Well, it's really interesting. I was kind of nerding out a little bit. I was going on, I guess there's a pretty popular YouTube page called it's a Nerd of the Rings, because I was just bored and I was watching the was it the Rings of Power, and the show's not so great, but some of it's really interesting, and they take a lot of the stuff from the Silmarillion, and I was just like reading like through like the mythos that Tolkien put in his universe, where he creates Ero-Luvatar as like the god of his world or his universe, and he creates these lesser gods, and then they sing all creation into existence, and then when the creation is kind of being made, these other gods come into, I guess, the material world that they actually made in the song. I don't know, I just found it really fascinating of like that's kind of almost what this idea is. So these other beings are like lesser gods, and especially compared to humans, you would just know that they came from a place that's not here, and they're superior to us. And so that's kind of seemed like the story that's being retold. And even God has angels that have certain duties. So you can imagine like these other mythologies saying, oh, well, this is your sun god, this is your moon goddess, this is the god of the sea, and this is, so there was these other beings that God gave duties to. And I believe that's kind of what, yeah, from like a scientific perspective, it's like, oh, well, they're aliens from outer space. But I mean, like, that's kind of a modern spin on it, like a scientific, like a science fiction spin on like a story that's been told since man could speak and write things down.
I've
So you
often
look at
wondered.
God at the head of the company, and there is all these board members. They are the fake gods, as so well. They are gods, but they're not. You can't control some of those. Some of those will go rogue.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, me and my good friend, I did a spin-off podcast over my YouTube channel, and we've been going through the Book of Enoch. And so, have you guys ever read through that at all?
No.
You should check it out because it's really interesting, especially like the first part of first Enoch is going into the book of the Watchers. And so the Watchers are the ones who came down and they sinned with women, took wives, and they begat a race of giants, Nephilim. And so that story is really interesting because I think that's these other gods, the sons of God, that came down and they taught men technology, like all kinds of knowledge of the astrology, witchcraft, the arts of war, and all that kind of stuff. And it's really interesting because I mean it kind of lines up with, in a Sumerian version of it, it might be the Anunnaki came down and they taught men things. But it's like I said, it's the same story. And then some people would say, oh, well, the Bible or this Hebrew mythology is copied off Greeks and Romans and Sumerians and Egyptian. But I believe that it's all one story. You're going to get different perspectives depending on where you're from. But I think that there's really good evidence that the people in the Mesopotamian region, they recognize that no matter what you called this certain god, that was a god that they had in their pantheon, but his name was this, where they were from.
Right. The cave. I saw a short from you the other day where you showed this cave, and you'd put it through AI, and that blew my marbles. That really did. I mean, if that is so you've put that through the AI and the through a program, and it said no, this is absolutely real.
Well, it didn't say it's absolutely real, but it did not have the markers of it being AI. So if the people, for the audience, it was this video, and I saw it on Reddit, and it was these people who are exploring somewhere in the mountains of Kazakhstan, and so they pan back, and it looks like they have a drone footage. They're standing in front of what looks like this giant door or gate in this mountain. I mean, it's still really hard to say if it's absolutely genuine, but I mean, I don't know. The more I've kind of done research into things like that, there's all kinds of mysteries about, places in the mountains that either look like they were carved out of mountains, or these mountains look like they might have been buildings at one point, and then they melted or something. It's really strange, but I want to say that door probably looked like it was, I don't even know. It was probably like 50 feet tall, maybe bigger than 50 feet.
Huge.
And it was probably wider than that. It was probably like 100 feet wide, something like that. Maybe not that big, but it was absolutely massive.
Yeah, I think I found the original X account that posted that, and I was looking at some of the other videos that the X account put out, and it was more like natural beauty stuff that was on, and like wildlife videos and stuff like that. There was nothing on it that made me go, oh, you guys would post a fake video. Everything else seemed pretty like normal and like on the level. Yeah, because that was the weird thing. I was looking at it was I'd love to see the back of that mountain.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, to see how far does that go back, but because it just didn't look natural at all.
No, I mean the video looks absolutely real, but it's really, we're kind of really living in a kind of a confusing time with AI and stuff like that, because it's getting so much better. Like the things that AI can create. Even I was joking the other day, I posted a reel, because if you go on Instagram now, you have the option to do like auto translations, and it was taking my voice and it was turning it into Spanish. And not only did it do that, but my mouth was moving to Spanish, and it was like, but it was my voice turned into Spanish, and I was like, I mean, you could, I mean, if you're looking at my mouth, you can kind of tell that it's not real, but it's close enough. It's close enough. I mean, it blew my mind that I want to say that it translated that in the matter of minutes to do that.
That's insane.
Do you think with the AI thing? I mean, I've wondered this. If we're gonna get some sort of, I don't know, let's call it lights in the sky, or we're gonna get that moment where things are gonna get real weird. They've gone, you know what? We'll release this, because I don't know why they've released this technology to the public, because you would think they would, if the elites wanted to use it, maybe they have used it for years, and I think they have. I think they've had this AI video for a long time.
Yeah.
But I wonder why the public's got hold of it now. Is that so when something is revealed, like I don't know, a demon, an alien-looking creature, lights in the sky, they can just say, you know what, that mountain, that's AI.
Yeah, I mean, it could definitely be part of a misinformation campaign. I mean, a lot of people in the conspiracy community are aware of Project Bluebeam, or at least what they think it was supposed to be. And they thought, if you read, William E. Cooper's book, The Along Came a Pale Horse, and it's kind of talking about this idea that the government was going to fake some kind of alien invasion. And people were tying that with Project Bluebeam. If they could fake something, like something coming down. And it was probably even a couple of years ago, me and my buddy had a podcast and we talked about that. And I thought, you know what, the best way to fix something now would be they wouldn't even have to do anything outside. Because if they made something that was fake, it looked real enough. And if they presented on the news as it being real, it's kind of like that idea of War of the Worlds, where if the news is taking it serious, well, then people will believe it. But at the same time, you're right, that something could be legitimately real, photographed with somebody's cell phones or, your nice camera. And if the news said that was not real, depending on, basically what the public wants to believe. If they tell you to panic, people will panic. If they tell you it's fake, then people will think it's fake. And then people in the conspiracy community won't even know. We'll be like, well, I think it's fake, but because it's funny, even like the, as you said, you guys rebranded from Alien Addict, that for years people are like, oh, the government's hiding aliens. And now the governments are talking about openly about how there's potentially a mothership in our galaxy and all this kind of stuff. And now all the conspiracy people are saying they're lying.
Yeah.
So they were lying when they were saying there wasn't aliens, but now we know that they're lying because they're saying that there are. It just seems like whatever they're trying to tell us, it's trying to get us to believe something for some other reason that's going to be like the whole Hegelian dialect, problem, reaction, solution. They said there's this alien threat. Well, the answer will be more money, more control for them, more whatever. But we know that they're not looking out for our best interests. So we can be sure of that.
It does feel like something's building to something, though, doesn't it? It does feel like there's wheels that are in motion. I mean the whole 2027 like date keeps getting thrown around, and yeah, I think things are going to get a whole lot stranger before we get some sort of normalcy back.
Yeah, well, potentially. I mean, of course, even there's that 2030 date that's, like the World Economic Forum and people like that have been pushing. And there's a lot of agendas about 2030. And I mean, yeah, I mean, if you look at 2020 and you don't believe the news about that, it seems like there was a hard pivot on the direction we're going. And yeah, I think that's not the end of it. That's the beginning of something. Even back then they were talking about this is the new normal. We're not going back to the old way. So there's certainly an agenda moving forward, but yeah, what it is kind of anybody's guess. Cause I mean, I think that there's just a lot of confusion. And I think that's probably what they want.
Do you think people are waking up to all of this like more than you expected? Because I speak to people in like that I would have never thought, like neighbors that ask like conspiracy questions right now, and it's like I thought a few years ago that would have never happened. But do you think people are waking up?
I think a lot are. I mean, sometimes it's tough when you kind of do what we do to, like, you don't want to ever get so like tunnel vision in your own space and you feel like you're in this echo chamber. It seems like it. It definitely seems like it. I would say that from the people that I knew from like since I was a kid, went to high school with, when I first started posting on social media and I was saying, I was talking about LeBron James and he was doing his pre-game warm-up and he's doing all the gang signs, he's throwing up the sixes and he's doing all the weird stuff, and I was like, he doesn't worship the same God as us. And my friends were just like, what are you talking about? You think he worships the devil? And I said, well, I don't think he would never say it like that. But I think that he worships the God that's not our God. And you might call him the devil. You might call him Lucifer. You might call him, he's got many names. But they thought I was absolutely crazy talking about that. But since then, probably over the last year, I've had friends that reach back out to me and they're like, oh, things you're talking about are really interesting. When it wasn't that long ago. It was like, oh, JT's gone off the deep end. He's nuts now. But I think that, probably when you have recognized that you've been lied to about a lot of things, you're looking for some real truth and you're realizing that if they're lying about this, what else are they lying about? So I would say that if you haven't woke up a little bit, I mean, I don't know if there's much hope for you over the past 5 years, because if you haven't recognized you've been duped, I think a lot of us is probably, to get to be a certain age, you get disillusioned by the things that you thought were true or the things that they were trying to push you toward. And then you start to question things. And if you're not questioning things, like it might be because your life's so good right now that you don't need to. But for a lot of people, I think that the things that they hope for and they dream for, they kind of the systems that were put in place that were supposed to keep this place so stable, you obviously see that the foundation is not very stable. No, so then you start to question things, and if they do have our best interests in mind. So I would say that there's a lot of people. I would say that kind of the thing we were talking about with the alien thing, whether it's aliens or it's a supernatural thing, even like, to the shape of the earth, when people thought flat earth was the dumbest thing they've ever heard. And then the amount of people in the community that I'm in that are at least questioning those things, it's grown a lot, it seems like.
I think the way a lot of people woke up was through the pandemic, and not necessarily even the lies. It was the case that lots of people worked out that they'd made this unconscious deal with tomorrow, that it would be the same as the day that was before it. And there's just no guarantee of that.
For sure.
It's almost, to me, like my entire life. Well, I'm sorry, not my entire life, but the part of my life that I spent looking at conspiracy is completely being turned upside down now, and I'm looking more. I'm not religious, JT, at all. I do every now and then. My wife is. I go to church with my wife when she kind of drags me there, and I'm like, and I do feel good when I get there. But I don't know if I think the people are waking up, but are the people waking up to and this sounds weird me saying this, but are the people waking up to God?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of them are. I think that, the topic we've talked about a lot on my podcast recently is like Satan's little season and things like that. And the kind of the genesis for a lot of people is like the old world, talking about like Tartaria or weird structures that seem way more advanced that are in our past, and things like the mud flood. And a lot of people found that just because it's a fun rabbit hole, especially going down that. You're like, this is really bizarre. It's kind of like I always kind of compare it to like ancient aliens, because if you never really seen the megaliths around the world, the first time you see them, you're like, whoa, that's really weird. These things I thought there was only pyramids in Egypt, but they didn't tell me about all these other ones. And so the old world, or Tartaria, is kind of similar to that, except that one's even more fascinating because people will say, hey, wait a minute, there's a building like that in my town. That's really weird. I always thought that was kind of impressive building, and I never really realized when I looked into the history of it, they said they built that thing in 1 year or something, some kind of ridiculous timeline. And guess what? The windows are under the ground. That's weird. And so when people start to see that, they start to ask a lot of questions, because it's one thing if they lied about, how they built the pyramids. Because I think that when you watch shows like that, or even if you like listen to Rogan, and he has like Graham Hancock on, he's talking about how preposterous it is that they say that these primitive people drag these gigantic stones through the sand, and the quarries are like 500 miles away. So you realize that doesn't make any sense. But it hits a little closer to home, and like literally it's a building in your own town. And supposedly they built this building when there was like 10,000 people living there. They built all these courthouses, post offices, and state capitol buildings and things when the population did not justify it. So then people start to question recent history, and then they start to really say, what could this mean? And then I think, people check out the iconographies on these buildings, and it's whether they're the cathedrals or they're old structures that look kind of Roman, they're all represented with angels and gods or Jesus and the saints. So people are saying, well, maybe they're trying to hide like the spiritual side of things. And maybe that's where all the scientism keeps pushing us toward that we are the greatest thing here, when people are saying, but it's not so good right now. The scientism is supposed to make our lives easier, and it's supposed to make things better. But it seems like maybe things were better before all this stuff happened. So then people start to question if, are they trying to hide God from us?
The old world buildings and stuff like that. It's the epitome of hiding in plain sight. And so I went down that rabbit hole. I really enjoy it. I mean, it was when I first found out about the World's Fairs. That's what set me off there. And then the first thing that came to mind was I went to Milan once, and I did a tour around the cathedral in the middle of Milan, and I thought to myself afterwards, how come How come I went round this building? Like I had like breakfast in a cafe across the road from it. I was looked at this thing for hours, and it's only until now it dawned on me like, how the fuck did we build something like that? How did we build something like that with horses and carts? And like you say, the population of Milan was probably like 8,000 people tops, and there just happened to be like a good chunk of those 8,000 people were master stonemasons. Like it doesn't make any sense.
Who needed a door that big?
Who needed
Right.
doors that big? Yes.
Right. That's another thing is if you see like this, the size of these places, they're so overbuilt is kind of the best way you could say it. They seem like, yeah, what justifies making like the pillars? Like if you have like this almost this Roman, Greco-Roman building, the pillars on the building are like 6 feet in diameter and they're 36 feet tall. And you're like, this makes no sense because you really think about it. Even if you have central air, which supposedly you didn't then, why would you build the ceiling so high? Because, you know, heat rises. Because you imagine how cold these buildings would be like in the wintertime. So why would they do that? Why would you build a door that's 20 feet tall? I mean, some of the ones in Europe, there's crazy ones where it looks like the handle on the door is about 15 feet off the ground. And it takes a guy, you know, guys pushing the door shut. And you're like, why would they do that? I mean, the only reason you really have a door that big is because you need to fit something in there that was really big. But it's the church. So like, what would they need to put in there? You know, was it a person that was that big? Was it an angel? What was it? I guess from our perspective, it doesn't seem practical. Again, my day job before was in construction. So now we just build the cheapest, most efficient place you could build, you know, because I mean, it's just a place of commerce for most people. So why you don't need all that. But we're talking about a time where it would have been harder to do. The people would not need as much. So what justified all this? I mean, at the very least, it seems like a time there was a time of some kind of prosperity. I would say that when you can make great art, you know, the level where like the statues, that's another rabbit hole. You're like looking at the statues they created, with some of them have like the cloth has just like wrinkles in them, or they have a
The
veil over their
veil.
face, or like a net, and they're made of one piece of stone. How? I mean, I'm not saying men could not do that, because I think that men are pretty capable of things. I mean, you can see some great craftsmen today, but you can't really justify it in the way that, well, how do they have the time to do that? Because we live in a time where you don't have that much time.
Yeah.
You know, they're trying to get us in that hamster wheel, and you got to go, 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 and you don't have time for you're living for your evenings and the weekends, and that's not going to knock out those amazing structures and statues.
No, we had a conversation about last night, actually, on last night's podcast. There was something like this, because like it might not even be something I like particularly believe, but I was kind of I was steel man in the idea of AI and like the positive effects of AI. If you because we always look at the Terminator Doomsday scenario, you know, of where it ends everything. I was trying to like put forward an idea of AI which like takes care of all the medial tasks that that sort of bog us all down, and we replace commas with things that are that's more efficient for machining and stuff like that. Because as far as we're concerned, as far as our written history goes, we've always lived in like a time of scarcity. Doesn't matter what you are and what level, there is some element of scarcity to you. Whereas if you could create a world of abundance, then you would start like a new Renaissance era. And I wonder if that's what Tartaria was. I wonder if that's like the hidden time of abundance.
I mean, I think that's what people think. I mean, you know, there's the theories about what these buildings actually their purposes might have been, besides just being aesthetically beautiful. If there was some kind of a component of free energy, because you see like the copper domes and the spires and all the weird antennas that are coming off these buildings, and a lot of them have like these water systems that are around them. And was a really interesting documentary that came out a few years ago, and it was called the Lost History of Flat Earth. You guys ever seen that one?
I think
No.
I did. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I want to say it's 5 parts. They might be like an hour a piece, so it's like 5 hours. And that's a lot of people's first kind of dipping their toe into learning about some of this stuff. And the guy who created it kind of built it off a lot of other people's work, and it was well done. It was really well thought out. But yeah, when you get into like the showing the star forts, like these, or star forts or star cities, and they all got these water systems. Yeah, and the idea was that somehow these buildings might have been able to pull energy from the ether. And if there was free energy, well, that would actually kind of explain how they had time to do some of these things. And they have the component of like sound and sound resonance and frequencies. And it makes sense. It kind of makes sense in the way that like electromagnetism and frequencies, it seems like a technology that they don't push. Maybe because it does work. Because it seems like a renewable thing. And we know that there's electricity in the air and things. And if you could ever harness some of the power of the sky, maybe that's what people are showing, and through the art and some of the the aesthetic beautiful things have a practical purpose on top of that. And it only makes sense to me that the economy was different then, because it's not like it is now. Because like I said, you don't have time to do that kind of stuff. But if it doesn't seem practical now, well, how would it be practical to them when we're told that they had primitive tools, they had horses and carts, and they had to do everything by hand? I don't think that makes sense. I think it's, like I said, it's similar to the pyramids, where I don't believe they built those things by hand.
Well, not only
unless they were
that,
giant hands.
yeah, not only that, humans, as far as we know, we lived to be what, 80, 100 if we're lucky now. People back then, apparently they died a lot younger. And some of these buildings, I mean, don't quote me on this, but I think I heard you talk about the Great Wall of China. Is it 1,000 years?
It's over 1,000 years, supposedly, it took them to build the Great Wall of China.
And I think you said something really that it made me laugh about, well, why don't you just go? It'd be a lot easier just to go and kill them rather than rather than build a wall like for 1,000 years. And like I never thought of it like that. I'm like, holy yeah.
Yeah, it would be to justify that, because the people who could build the wall probably could build a lot of weapons of war. So yeah, to me it would be like, well, this is not practical, because this is not going to help any of us to build this wall. And if these people are really that bad of a force, they'd likely be attacking you the whole time you're trying to build it. So why don't you just go take them out? But the interesting thing about that, and I'm not sure if you guys ever noticed this or heard this, but the places where you might be firing, bow and arrow out the top, they're facing into China. And if you see like a lot of where the wall is, there's
I've walked the wall.
Okay, did you notice
not
that?
all of it, but yeah, I've walked it.
Yeah, they have like on a lot of the sides, it looks like you could get into, like the hills are kind of built up on the one side where you could actually get into China easily. So it's kind of like the wall looks like it's backwards. And that's where people see on the maps, they see Tartaria. Now, Tartaria, I think that might be a little bit of a psyop to say everything is Tartarian. Every old world structure is Tartarian, because if you read old books, they actually mention Tartaria, but I think that they're actually talking about Mongolia. But I don't think that Tartaria or any place any building is too specific to one place. And that's why some people say, oh, well, it's a Tartarian empire around the world. It's like, no, there was a connected society around the world. Now you have just like today. And again, you have like the pyramids. You have pyramids everywhere. They're not all Egyptian, but they're, the regional places, they still built the same way. So there was a shared knowledge, and maybe there was a bit of a shared culture, throughout time. And I'm kind of in a little bit, I don't know how many people have thought this, but when you see Greco-Roman things everywhere, I think that Rome was actually a bigger empire than people tell us. They conquered more than just the region of like the Mesopotamia, Europe, and northern Africa. I think that when you see Greco-Roman buildings in China, I think they went to China. Even Alexander the Great went to India. So why would it be hard to believe that the Romans, who had an empire that was way longer, why would they have stopped before they conquered everything? I think that they did.
Yeah, a lot of buildings in the UK. You look at them and you look at some of the ancient Rome buildings. There is similarities to these buildings, and again, going back to which blew my mind, these doorways that are underground, which have
Mm-hmm.
that have no right being there. You know, I have no idea why that. But Lee showed me that, and I'm like, that that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Absolutely.
they do look. There is a lot of them all over the world that they have that Roman look to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they got them in Australia, China, all the Americas, all the way up to Canada. You know, from South America all the way up to Canada. You have them all the way down in South Africa, and you have them in Australia. You have them in Northern Asia. They're everywhere. But there's also, you have the Greco-Roman things, but then you have the cathedrals, which seems like was probably built in a different time because they're distinct. You know, you have like a Roman basilica, but then you have this cathedral. A Gothic cathedral looks totally different. So I mean, probably some of them are more impressive than the Roman stuff, but they're all impressive compared to what we build today.
Yeah, I was listening to one of your podcasts actually, and you guys were talking about the idea that maybe these resets come along, and it's the power structure that's in there just resets everything every few hundred years and sticks us back to the beginning. It's a terrifying thought, that, because clearly when if there's some truth to the old world and there's some truth to like whatever the Tartaria stuff is, but Tartaria is just a good name for it, isn't it? Right now,
Yeah, it's kind of a catch-all term, and that's why you still use it sometimes because people know
Mm.
what I'm talking about when I mention it.
But it would seem like they allow things to get to a certain point of technology, and then they pop it back down again, and you kind of wonder whether we're starting to get to that point of connection and that point of technology right now where if things are, if this has happened like time after time after time, it it feels like it's coming on schedule, doesn't it, for another one?
Well, I don't actually believe in the many resets. I believe in a real big one, and then I
Mm.
maybe believe in like a second one after the last big one, because I believe, because I actually believe the Satan's little season theory, which would basically be that sometime during the first millennium AD, which that's when our chronology was wrecked,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why there is an AD chronology. Because if you think about it, if we had a full connected chronology from when we believe, whether you believe the story in the Bible or not, when God said, "Let there be light," if you could count from day one to now, I think we'd still be on that calendar.
Mm-hmm.
But there was some kind of massive reset, and I think that was the Book of Revelation. I think that was bowls of wrath, trumpets from God, and I think that's where, when you look into the Roman architecture, lots of it's buried. Even today, I always share with my buddies all the articles, because they kind of got like, your kind of personalized Google News feed. They're always sending me, articles about how they just discovered some Roman thing that's buried under the ground. Some guy's farming in his field and he finds a Roman mosaic, or they're trying to add to the subway system and they find a Roman bathhouse. All these Roman places had to be excavated. And I think that's really weird that we don't really hear how it all got buried. Like, how would you not know that there was a Roman thing under where you live? I think that speaks to a reset. And I think that if you ever learned about like the catacombs, where there's like under Paris, under Paris is like the most famous one, but there's millions of bones under in these catacombs in Paris.
Ukraine's got a huge one, hasn't it? I think Ukraine's got a big one. It's like
They're actually all over the place. I think
yeah.
that Paris is the biggest one we know about.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really odd. It's really odd that you have these bones all arranged in these very, like, geometric patterns, and they're all perfect, and it's just the most eerie thing you've ever seen. And if you look at when they say that those bones were placed there, the population of Paris, I want to say, was forgive me, I think it might have been like around 500,000,
Hmm.
but there's like 6 million people's worth of bodies under Paris.
Yeah.
So it makes no sense. So, but then if you look, yeah, again, you look under a lot of these old world cathedrals, they have catacombs under them. So it seems like there was a massive reset then. And some of us who are looking into kind of like the real fishy times and like kind of the late 1700s, 1800s, that could have been the last reset, where that really disconnected us from maybe our true history. Because that's like, if you look into the 19th century at all, every city's burned down multiple times. There's wars everywhere. And the stories we hear about that time, it just seems like technology is advancing and then things are becoming obsolete almost as soon as they're invented.
Mm.
Versus like you have this very stale period where like no progress. And then everything just goes like this. 19th and 20th century, we go from wagons to the moon, supposedly.
Yeah.
But even if we didn't go to the moon, I mean, you have, jet aircraft and things like that.
Yeah.
Is,
In a few generations, right? Wright brothers to the moon in a few generations.
yeah, it's
supposedly.
unbelievable.
Madness.
Like literally unbelievable.
I'll tell you something with because you mentioned bones, and I spoke to. I don't know if have you heard the Nephilim look like clown guy Paul?
Oh yeah,
Stobbs?
Paul's a good friend of mine.
Yeah, we had Paul on, and I asked him about where are the bones, of these Nephilim. Does anybody like know where they are?
Well, we think that the Smithsonian's got a lot of them. I mean, if you see, like, there's a lot of old news articles from the late 1800s, early 1900s, where they say they found like 12-foot beings. Sometimes I've heard up to like 15 feet. Now, people deny that, or they say that these newspapers were doing satire, they were joking, or they were just trying to get publicity. But yeah, there is evidence that they have found them, and people still find some big giants. But it's kind of been my belief that biblically you have the first big reset is the flood, the deluge, and there are mythologies all around the world, not just the Bible, that speak of a great flood. So you imagine that I think even geologists, they talk about there's this one massive sedimentary fill from what they would say, what did they call it? I forget the period, the period they call it, where there was this massive shift, and they could call it an ice age. But there's this one big sedimentary fill, and then there's a second one, and I think that's the second one is the mud flood, and I think that's where people talk about like how the buildings got buried. But if you think about it, if the biggest giants, which I believe would have been the ones before the first deluge, so they might be way under the ground if they're under the first sedimentary fill. And then you have things after that, and I believe that there was giants after the flood, but they might not have been as big. And yeah, I mean, I think that if they do find them, they don't let us know about them. There's in America we have these supposedly Native American mounds that they say they're burial mounds, but you're not allowed to dig into them because of I wouldn't say necessarily PC, but you can't dig into them, and you can't actually display what they call Native American artifacts like that in certain places. So I think that there certainly could be evidence that we're just not allowed, we're not privy to. And I don't think they would tell us if they did find something like that, because it doesn't really fit the evolutionary paradigm.
So I wonder what the reason is then for the fake narrative. Is it just a control structure that's being done, or have people had knowledge that's like been passed down after these calamities, and people have decided to just say, look, we can use this to our advantage?
Yeah, I mean, of course, like I said, that's the Satan's little season theory. Would be that if we're living in that time, it's because they're really trying to disconnect us from our past. So if you find a big femur bone, you could say it was a dinosaur instead of it was a giant humanoid. That's actually interesting. I want to say that the very first dinosaur bone was found by, I think it was a guy named, I believe it was Robert Plot. And that was probably might have been the late 1500s, I believe, somewhere in that range. And he was at Oxford University. And his conclusion at first was that it was a femur bone of a potential Roman elephant. But then his final conclusion that it was the femur of a giant humanoid. It was a giant's femur. But then later at that same university, the guy, I forget the guy's name, but he later said, "Oh no, that's actually a dinosaur bone." So people say that they started finding dinosaur bones in the 1800s, but was it that they just started labeling them dinosaur bones in the 1800s? And it's not to say that there wasn't monstrous animals. It's just that, I think that that's the cover story for, maybe dragons, maybe Nephilim, maybe giants.
Well, the guy that because I forgot his name as well, but the guy that labeled that a dinosaur bone had actually theorized dinosaurs. Like I believe it was the year before.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like he came up with the idea of like that there was these like gigantic lizards that roamed the earth like millions of years ago, and then 12 months later something came along where he said, see, I said this 12 months ago, so that's clearly what it is.
Yeah, talk about confirmation bias, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's and see the wild thing I've got about dinosaurs is as well, because we already had myths of dragons, so it makes more sense to me that if you've already got myths and stories of dragons, that if you go and dig up a Tyrannosaurus head, you wouldn't go dinosaur, you go, oh shit, we were right about the dragons.
Right.
That makes so much more sense.
Right, yeah. Well, I think, again, that doesn't fit the paradigm, because the paradigm says these things are hundreds of millions of years old. Mm-hmm. They're way older than man. So man could not be writing about them because they did not exist when men did. But men were just making up stuff for many, many years. That's why you get into like Ancient Aliens, where men were writing about very weird things, but they're just mythologies. And I think that that's kind of where my conclusion is that, yeah, they're trying to paint all mythologies as just fiction, but that's not how mythologies were seen to like the Greeks. The Greeks believed they were oral traditions, and a lot of times they were moral tales to, kind of like in a religious type way, like the hero's journey. And they believed they weren't, I don't think that the Greeks were stupid. I mean, the Greeks were very smart. I mean, a lot of the foundation of our kind of modern society was built on like kind of Greek and Roman philosophy and government. So these people were not dumb. So it's not necessarily to say that if you have a mythology, I'm not saying it's true per se, but I think it's based on truth. That's why if you didn't have some like a concrete document, even if you found the document, people would still say it wasn't true. But if you have a story, it's meant to pass this knowledge down. And so how much, where do you separate the fact from the mythology or the fiction? It's hard to say, but if you believe that these people were not dumb and the things they were writing about were true, that leads you to a much more kind of mystical place that we live, potentially a spiritual place. So you'd say that if the Bible writes about giants, it's not because they were allegorizing anything; they were talking about literal giants. So Christians, I think it's really hard to believe when some of them don't believe in giants, because I mean, David and Goliath was 9 foot tall. I mean, I don't think there's any 9 foot tall humans now. Mm-hmm. They say his spear was the size of a weaver's beam. So he wasn't just tall, he was really big. Mm-hmm. And the Bible speaks about Nephilim, and they're the offspring of angels.
A lot of people, I heard you say this on one of your podcasts, that they anybody that gets into flat Earth that doesn't think that the flat Earth is one of the biggest things that proves a creator. Mm-hmm. And it gets me thinking about Antarctica and why we can't go there. Like why there's a treaty with the entire world that doesn't seem to get on at all. But when it comes to Antarctica, we're okay. We're all same with space. with the ISS. You know, you've got Russian cosmonauts and American, English, everybody all on there. But and it's the same with Antarctica. They all seem to get along with that, and I don't know why more people do not ask questions about that, because
Well, they're
there's
certainly
something
starting
there.
to. They're certainly starting to. Well, it's interesting about the early roots of NASA is they were looking to the ocean. They were doing lots of research into the ocean. You know, if you look at kind of biblical cosmology or like maybe ancient Hebrew cosmology, you know, you have water around the whole realm of the earth, and then there's even waters under it. So with that kind of view, yeah, ocean is kind of like outer space. Now, it's not like what they show you in the movies or what NASA shows you, but there's the idea that this water realm is connected to the underworld and weird things like that. So then, yeah, if you see like videos of Antarctica, there is a giant ice wall. Now, is that the ice wall that keeps all the waters in here? I mean, it's hard to say, but it it really does not make a lot of sense that travel is limited there. Because for the
Did you?
most part, it's not like the three of us would go there because we don't have the means. And if it is just a bunch of ice and freezing and storms and just a horrible place, then you don't have to limit my mobility there because it's naturally limited. But why would these governments agree to not like mine the resources there? That seems really odd. And I know that there was a story that I saw on X a while back. We talked about this on the podcast. There was like this Asian kid, I think he's like 19, and he was trying to raise some money from some kind of like, I think he's had a family member with cancer. And he had this little tiny airplane. And his goal was to fly to every different continent. And he landed in Antarctica and they arrested him. And they were like holding him for a while. I'm not sure if I think he's probably got out by now, but I was like, that's so weird that it's kind of like that he supposedly landed there and it wasn't his intention to do that because of, you know, it's supposedly weather, I think, or something like that. But it'd be kind of like you kind of say, hey, you were dumb to do this. Now get out of here. But to arrest him, it's almost like, did he see something that he was not supposed to down there?
Well, did you guys see the that weird clip from one of Mr. Beast's live stream the other
Yes.
day?
Mm-hmm.
That's weird. Did you see that, Ollie?
No.
So one of the guys that he's like one of his friends, they were doing questions. I don't know whether somebody asked a question on the stream or it was just brought up. One of them brought the ice wall up, and then one of his friends turns around to Mr. Beast and said, "Have you been to Antarctica?" And he's like, "Yeah, I've been to Antarctica." And then one of them jokes said, "Did you see the ice wall?" He's like, "Yeah, I saw the ice wall." And then it kind of gets a bit awkward where him and the guy that went didn't really want to say anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mr. Beast said something which was really quite cryptic and said, "Well, let's just say if you go to Antarctica, make sure you take someone with you."
Well, I think he was saying when you go there,
really
you're always
weird.
going to have somebody with you. You're not going to be
Yeah.
able to go explore it by yourself.
Yeah, it was a really awkward exchange.
Definitely. Yeah, it almost seemed like it was a work the way they were, because the one guy was like, "Oh yeah, he saw the ice wall. I saw it too." And then
Yeah.
Mr. Beast was kind of like, yeah, he kind of clammed up. He acted very suspicious. You know, there is that very interesting Admiral Byrd interview where he was on some really old TV show.
Yes, I've seen that.
The
and he was talking about that.
Longines Chronoscope, it was called.
Okay, yeah. So he was talking about beyond the South Pole, that there is a land that's unexplored that's as big as America. And he mentions that there could be possibly uranium there, vast resources of coal and oil. And I thought that's a really weird thing to say. It's like, what do you mean beyond the South Pole? Because you could go explore it from the other side. If you could circumnavigate Antarctica, you could just go from the other side. And how would you know that there was resources there that would need to be mined? If at that point they really had never, like if you explored a little bit, like how would you know that there was deposits of all these natural resources unless you had more knowledge of it? It was very cryptic. It was kind of leading people to believe that yeah, there's something there. And right around that same time is when they had that treaty that they would not mine Antarctica, which why wouldn't they? Because these people are not worried about the global warming back then. Like, why
It's all
would
for
they
the
care?
penguins. All
Oh,
for
the
the
penguins
penguins.
taste great, apparently.
You know, it would
Um,
honestly would seem like a great place to mine because it wouldn't affect us as much. And now, you know, I'm saying like versus when they're trying to get like shale and they're doing stuff under our ground and potentially it's triggering some kind of earthquakes in the Midwest in America. Like, wouldn't it be better to mine there
mm.
where we don't live? I
I'd
mean,
never
Where
thought about
nobody
it.
lives.
Yeah, I'd never thought about like what you just said there. How obviously if you could circumnavigate the globe, you could just go from the other side. I feel stupid for not thinking that, to be honest. Like because in my head, I was always just thinking of, oh, when you go on on an expedition, you've got to cross that icy bit before you can get to the lush green pastures he's talking about.
yeah, it's
Um,
almost like it almost like makes more sense on a flat Earth model. It's like because you have to
yeah,
go here and then you have to go past.
because there's a
When yeah,
barrier
you could
there.
just go from the other side and you would because if you could get to the pole, regardless, you could get to it easily from all the other sides of it. I would think.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't make sense. But you mentioned before, like the Satan's Little Seeds. Now, you're the first you were the first person I saw talk about Satan's Little Seeds. You're on TikTok and stuff like that. Where does that? So, if I take it that like, so the brief overview of that is that I think that Christ returned. Now we live in this time where Satan is ruling, it rules this realm type thing.
Well, biblically, if you read in the Gospels, it mentions more than one time that Satan was the ruler of this realm.
Right.
And then Jesus comes, he takes, after his crucifixion, he goes down to hell, takes the keys to hell and death, and he ascends. And then he's given all authority over heaven and earth. So then he ascends to the right hand of the Father, you know, promising he's going to come back. But at that point, there's this very imminency of his return. And when he returns, he's going to bind the strong man. And then the gospel is going to go out to all the nations. It's going to spread because the devil will not be allowed to deceive anymore. So that's when he's stuck in a pit. And so in Revelation chapter 20, it mentions that he's put in a pit for 1,000 years. And during this time, Christ and the saints reign for 1,000 years. Then it says that the devil will be loose for a little season or a short season. So I don't believe that the devil rules like he used to. He can really only rule like through deception, which kind of makes sense in the way that, you know, I mean, you guys are conspiracy theorists, so you know, like who the elites seem to worship,
Yeah.
maybe kind of again like hidden in plain sight. They can't really openly acknowledge their allegiance, but they kind of do through symbols or little coded messages
The
and
odd satanic ceremony in the middle of a Taylor Swift concert. Stupid
right.
little things like that.
Well, right, but it's isn't it kind of funny to think even so you have these statues of like Zeus and these other pagan gods, and they'll say, "Oh, that's just cultural. That's just a mythology." Zeus never really existed, but there were Zeus worshippers in the times of Jesus. You know, he was the head god of gods back in those days. And then where did all the Zeus worshippers go? Supposedly they're gone. But it seems like that maybe there still are, but they don't openly acknowledge it, or they might worship Apollo, but they don't openly say that. So it seems like that makes sense to me if we are in the little season, that they can't really openly acknowledge it because Christ is king. So he's really taken all authority. So they can only kind of worship him through like the secret societies where they kind of like literally like a wink and a nod, they cover up an eye or throw up a gang sign and they kind of tell you, but they don't openly tell you. When back in the day, they openly told people and they wouldn't have to be shy about it.
Is this season almost coming to an end? Because I'm going to be honest, the weather is shit.
I mean, that's what people wonder is how long is Satan's little season? Some people say, well, if Jesus came back in, 70 AD or sometime in the first century, and there's 1,000 years. So you're saying that the little season is over 1,000 years? Well, we've done some research into like the chronology. Again, I mentioned that the timeline's broken. there's some really good evidence, and there's some researchers like Antonio Fomenko, and there's this Gunnar Heinsohn. And I want to say there's another one called the lost time concept, that some people believe that there was either like 700 years added to our timeline, or up to 1,000 years were added to our timeline. So the Gunnar Heinsohn research, actually, I did a breakdown with Paul from Understanding Conspiracy, and that was a really interesting podcast talking about how, like, if you examine the strata, the strata kind of tells the real story about the chronology, that all the Roman structures for like the first 1,000 years are all built at the same level. And people would call it, the historians would call it a dark age, where there was no advancement in architecture. And when they started to build these old buildings, they built them in a Renaissance style of the first century. So Gunnar Heinsohn's conclusion was, no, they were actually built at the same time period. And the Dark Ages is kind of a lie. There's just a lot of fluff years in them. They actually, architecture, language, and culture did advance, but it wasn't at the rate that people thought, because it was all built during the same time period. So I think that, well, a lot of people who believe in the little season, they kind of pinpoint that 1776 date as being some kind of massive shift in the world. You have like the American Revolution, and later it leads to like the French Revolution. Again, then you get into the 1800s of civil wars, and just then eventually into the 19th century, you have a couple world wars. It seems like that there was this big shift in the world. And so maybe people are believing that maybe we could be coming up to like the 250 years of the little season. Now, I've never put like a timeline on how long it could be. The only thing the Bible mentions about this time is that Satan deceives the nations and he gathers an army. And then there's this battle called the Battle of Gog and Magog at the end. And then God sends down fire from heaven, burns up the enemies, and throws the devil in the lake of fire. So it's kind of my conclusion that the little season is as long as it takes. So if the devil is trying to deceive everyone, eventually kind of moving them away from the knowledge of the past and gathering an army, well, how long does that take? I guess it depends on us, that if we are agreeable to the idea, then it could be sooner. Now, if people are waking up and there's resistance, maybe it could take longer.
Are we winning?
Well, I mean, I would say the devil's deceiving people. I mean, I would say that there's this separation. You can definitely see that, again, we talk about some people waking up, but you really think, like, for a long time, people are really just kind of marching along to whatever they were being taught. And now it does seem like that there's an awakening happening. So maybe there's a little bit of pushback. But no, I do think that, yeah, like I mean, if the Bible says it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Now, how long is it going to take? Again, I think it depends on us. I mean, I think that there's a lot of people speaking truth, and I think a lot of people are waking up to the deception, but I mean, yeah, that's not to be a black pill. I mean, but it does seem like that the masses, shifts like 2020, you see how quickly people will fall in line based on what their governments tell them. So if the governments continue to push this way, people are going to be deceived for sure.
I'm under the impression as well, like people like to turn around and say things like, "Oh, people wouldn't fall for it again. People wouldn't do things like that again." I just don't believe that. I think that the second that happens, if anything, I think people are more fragile now. So if you just sprinkle a bit of fear in it, I think people will fall right back in.
Yeah, sadly, I'm inclined to agree that it's easy to say. It's easy to talk tough behind a microphone or a keyboard and say, "Oh, I'm never doing that again." But I mean, the governments, the one thing they've really done is they've pushed people into cities, made them people very dependent on the supply chains and the places they go get food, versus a time where, you imagine if we all had our own farms and we could tell them no. But that's not easy to do now.
Nope.
So if they kind of pulled the levers of power and they shut businesses down and they shut supply chains down, they could do it. They could win the revolution might not even fire a shot versus these people, because again, who are you going to go against?
Yeah, it's all well and good, like you say, the tough talk, but if as soon as supplies start dwindling and food starts getting short, and it's your children which are telling you, "I'm really hungry now," I think you're going to do pretty much whatever you're told to do to make that stop.
It would be very difficult to resist that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing you hear a lot about now. You hear the farmers. We've just had it in the UK. The farmers are in trouble, and you get the farmers are striking. I don't. Do you get a lot of that in America? Because I know Bill Gates. He's bought loads of farmland, and Bill Gates. I, I get a feeling he's not the great man you think he is. I think he seems a little bit sinister.
Understatement of the week, I think. There, Ollie.
Yeah, I would say
he might be listening.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously, if you heard his TED Talks and stuff like that, the stuff they openly say, I mean, yeah, the whole stuff before even 2020 was like, wasn't it like that fall that they had some kind of meeting and they had some kind of test run about just coincidentally what exactly happened in 2020? It was unbelievable. So yeah, then they openly talk about these agendas, and you have like again, go back to the World Economic Forum about how they're saying in 2030 people are going to own nothing and be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you talking about? Like, how would people own nothing unless?
And who's voting for this? Like, who's making this decision to decide that this is a good idea going forward?
Not the people.
No, the Bill Gates clip from his TED talk. That I've shown that to so many people, and it's almost like I can see something different than what they see going on the screen. When he turns around, they talk about global population, and he said to bring down populations here. If we do a really good job with vaccines, we can bring that down by as much as like maybe 70% or something like that. I go, there's only so many ways you can take that. Like that you can bring down the global populations if you do a really good job with vaccines. What the fuck is that doing on like a mainstream debate show? Not debate show, like presentation show. It's insane.
Well, just to say that out loud, yeah. I mean, I want to say that the people who tried to spin it as that in the third world, people have more kids because lots of them die young. So if you vaccinate, then they won't have to have as many kids. And it's like, that still doesn't make any sense, because wouldn't it be about the same? Because they would, if they didn't have to have as many because they wouldn't be dying, wouldn't it still kind of leave you about the same amount of people?
Yeah, you wouldn't be bringing the population down. You could, if you'd have turned around and said like we could bring birth rates down, which would like bring down infant mortality or something like that, I could accept that. But the way it was said, to me it was clear. It was clear what was being said.
Well, it's a thing that you know, until the last 4 or 5 years, you would say that, yeah, I mean, because people would say vaccine's good. But then now we're saying, no, I don't think that they are. So, So seeing it in hindsight, you're like, oh my gosh, yeah. When you first see that, because of course, I don't think most of us were probably paying attention when he said it originally. But when you see the clip of it, knowing the things that happened recently, you're like, oh my gosh, it's like he said that right in front of everybody. And now we're like, and then he's one of the guys promoting the latest one. And you're like, no, I'm not getting that. I'm definitely not doing that.
Do you think there's an us versus them like mentality with this, or do you think inside like the halls of power, it's more like a Game of Thrones situation where you have various people fighting various corners? Because it feels to me that if like everybody was in on it and everyone that got to like a certain level of power was on the other team, that this like takeover would have been a lot quicker. And if it is something that's biblical, it is like a quite easy like good versus evil and like Satan versus God. There must be power players on both sides.
I would say, yeah. I mean, structurally, the lead, I think that they are the bad guys, but there's a lot less of them. A lot of analogies people use is, I think there's that movie. It's like an ant's life or something like that.
Yeah.
It's a bug's life. And it's like the bees are the bad guys? I forget.
Something like
or the
that.
grasshoppers or something.
Yeah,
I don't
know
even
what
know.
you're
Like,
talking about.
Grasshoppers.
yeah, the
I think
grasshoppers. But then
I
they're
think
like
it's the
saying,
grasshoppers.
if they ever realize how much more of them than there are of us, we're in trouble.
Mm.
But it's kind of like they have to play this long game because they can't shift it too hard. For one, it's like we do all the jobs they don't want to do, so they have to kind of layer this in where then eventually they won't need us. But when you think about the technology with like robotics and AI, they're definitely moving to a place where they won't need as many of us. I mean, it kind of makes sense in the way that if they want to rule, they still need people to rule, but they don't want as many of us to rule because that's a lot more work for them. They don't need as many of us as there are in order to live the lives they want to live or the places they're trying to go. But they need some of us. And I think that like the idea of AI replacing people, that's so real. I mean, that's so real. I was talking about that translation thing. I see people in the music business showing how quickly AI can write songs and can write scripts for movies and do all the things that once needed very talented people to do. I mean, it's frightening. I mean, because I think that's, when you see like old cartoons like the Jetsons, like you were saying about like that, if technology is advancing so much, it should start to make our lives easier. But our lives really have not gotten much better with all the more technology we've got.
No.
Because like the things, inflation and the scarcity of things, it's still a real problem. We should all be able to kick back and just let the robots clean the house and do all the stuff that we don't want to do, cut the grass and, whatever you got to do, go buy the groceries and do all the things. But the technology is there for that to happen, but it doesn't seem like it's as cheap as it should be.
And the weird thing with that is I've always said that the best level of control that these people have had on like we'll say like the West, because it's where we are, was I think in the early 2000s, like late 90s, early 2000s, because everybody was happy, everyone was just kind of rolling on, everyone had enough stuff. That's how you want to keep people if you want to control them. So the fact that things have gotten worse since then, it feels like the result is suffering. Do you know what I mean? Like what's being done is to cause suffering.
Yeah, they certainly seem malevolent. If that's what you mean, because like it doesn't seem like they want. You could see it going two ways, where they give you enough to keep you happy, then you shut up. Like I said, that certain people whose lives are going great, they don't want to know about conspiracies, because why would they?
Yeah,
they don't got time for that. They're going on vacation, they're going on their boat, they're doing fun things. So telling them that the society they live in is crumbling under them, like I don't want to hear that. Bum them out. But then you have people who are just trying to get by, and they're asking questions. Why did it not turn out like the way I thought it was going to? So those are the people who are asking questions. But then, potentially when you have like the idea of that a basic human income, they promote, where they probably just give you just enough. And I think that's probably the idea of you'll own nothing and be happy. They're going to give you just enough to get by. And then they could obviously stop those payments to you.
Yeah.
So then you might shut up too, because you're like, I can't afford to say anything now, to push back.
It does seem though like whatever this thing is, it's been playing a real long game, and I always look at these things that how long humans live for. So why do humans work? Because they are blatantly working for evil. They must. I believe they know there is evil that they're working for. Why do they do it? When have they got a promise of something from the other side? Satan? Have they got a promise of eternal life or something like that? Because they only live for what, 80 years, 100 years. Whereas, if you're on the right side, you're gonna live forever, essentially. Your soul will go on. So I don't understand what the big sell is with Satan.
Well,
For a human.
Yeah, I heard a really interesting quote from this old researcher. I think you ever heard of Doc Marquis?
I've heard that name.
Yeah, he wrote a bunch of books, but he claimed to be a part of the Illuminati at one point, and he came out of it. He became a born again Christian, and he was saying that the people in the secret societies worship Lucifer because they believe he's the only God who's here. It's almost like they have this idea that Jesus is gone now. It's the only God that's actually here is Lucifer. Now, can they actually physically interact with them? I often wonder that if they can. I think that I think some people probably do have access. I think for most people, their God is their bellies. Their God is their wicked appetites for things. And so you can promise people, all the abundance of the world, and then they'll do anything. You see people sell their souls for basically nothing. So some people actually get something in return. I think that they believe it's kind of like that Kabbalistic idea. I think they believe it in the way that they could be gods in some way through technology or through other means. I mean, I believe they're deceived. But yeah, if you're a Christian, you would say, yeah, there's nothing that you would trade for your soul. But certain people think that the Bible's true-ish. It's got some truth in it, but it's not all true. So if you believe, yeah, you're not meant to take it all literal. So like there's certain things that are true, but not all the scary things. It's kind of like the devil promising Eve that you can be as gods if you eat this. You be like a god. And he's kind of giving her half truths, not telling them the full truth. So this agenda goes forward. And yes, certain people probably really do know who they serve. Now, other people don't acknowledge it probably, or they don't want to know. But that's why you have like the levels of the secret societies that certain people, a elite few could control a lot of this because they control the purse. They control all the funds and they can kind of get people. And I think it's kind of like that idea that they believe, kind of like if you watch like the Marvel movies, like it's like Thanos. It's like Thanos thinks that he's doing something that's good in that movie. Now, from everybody else's perspective, it's like it's horrifying what he's saying. But he's like, no, we're going to eliminate half the population, and there's going to be abundance here. It's actually going to be really good. And if you read about through those secret societies or the initiated, the illuminated, they believe that they're better than other people. So it's like I think that they really do view the majority of their neighbors as cattle. And so they're too dumb to know any of this stuff anyways. And what I've got is better, and it'll be better in the long run. I don't think that everyone is like inherently knowing they're doing evil, but if you believe, like if you actually look into the secret societies, they kind of have that belief in like the checkerboard, the duality, where they believe they can make up for their bad deeds by doing like philanthropic things. So I'm going to make up for that by doing this other good thing. It's like they can kind of balance out their karma if they do that. And it's amazing what people can convince themselves of if they want to.
You can see the logic. Like if let's an example would be, because I've been toying with the ideas that the COVID vaccine was actually just a mass test to it because these people are obsessed with life longevity, and it seems that the RNA technology could be something that shifts how we deal with healthcare and can help extend lifespans and stuff like that. So if you were to take what they did during COVID as just this massive big test where they got like 10, 15, 20 years plus work done by just injecting as many people with as many different things as they could possibly do. Fucking horrible and horrendous thing. But let's imagine now that we jump forward 50 years, 100 years. All of us are gone at this point. Nobody cares about the past. All they remember is is that the doctors and scientists that would be speaking about would be, well, that's why kids don't get leukemia anymore. So what only happened like this generation would be revered as some of like the tough decisions that had to be made in like a generation and a half's time.
Right, except for they write the history book, so they would never mention. They wouldn't even mention the bad part.
No, they wouldn't mention the bad parts.
No, but I could definitely see that as that they carried out at the very least a massive experiment on the population, and then they could find what their ultimate goal with it is that they were looking for potentially a way to keep them alive, because that's the funny thing is like some people would say that with modern medicine and advancements in technology, men could live to be 200, 1,000, whatever, whatever they would say, but they would never give that to us.
No,
if that was true, right? Because again, they want less of us, not more of us. So yeah, you could definitely see if that was part of the goal, is to see, and I think most of us have said this did look like a test run for whatever else they might have coming up. A lot of people would just say, like, who's going to be compliant is what they might have been testing too.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Before we let you go, because I know we're coming up to the mark, but that is the thing that I don't get when it comes to things like Neuralink. The people that say, well, that's they're essentially going to get the mark of the beast there. If you get that and you are unaware that you're getting the mark of the beast, why is that person doing wrong in God's eyes?
Well, if I believe we're in Satan's short season, and I do, I believe that mark of the beast already came. I think that was, if you actually look into, I want to say in the first century, that there was actually a time where to go to the public market, you had to get marked with ashes on your hand or your forehead. And it came from some kind of altar where they were doing some kind of a ritual to the Caesar. So I believe that was the mark of the beast. I would say that in the way that something like that could be a hindrance to going to heaven potentially, it's like the kind of a thing where you're compromising what you believe to be your morals and whatever. It's kind of like, again, there's this kind of idea of like selling your soul doesn't come with like literally like the devil handing you a contract with, you're signing. Maybe it does in Hollywood, maybe it does in the music business, but not for us. It's like the idea of like selling out, doing something that really compromises your conscience and again, grieves the Holy Spirit in a way that if God says, I'll provide for you, and you do something because you don't believe that, well, I mean, that could potentially be, a damnable thing in that kind of situation. Yeah. Now, I mean, some people have floated the idea that the mark was the COVID jab. And so people say, can people still be saved? I mean, it's sad that people have asked me that question. I was like, yeah, because I don't think that that's what that was. And I know that a lot of us are too innocent that we would never think that that's what that was. Now, that's not the reason I didn't get it. I didn't get it for all the reasons that people probably in your audience didn't get it, because I don't trust these people. Now, it's not because I thought it was the mark of the beast. I think that I do wonder at some point of the idea of like transhumanism, like this us being like cyborgs or something, like people like Elon Musk talking about. I know it was years ago, and it doesn't seem as weird now as when he went on Rogan and he was talking about how people are going to try to live forever, like kind of try to put your consciousness into some kind of machine. I think that idea is kind of an old idea, but now it seems like they're definitely moving towards something like that. Now, can you be saved if you're not even fully human anymore? Now, maybe that might be a question people need to ask. That if Jesus came and died for humans, what if you're not human anymore? I think again, like that's kind of a question of your own conscience. Is like, would you be willing to accept whatever gift you get? And I think it's probably about what kind of strings come along with that gift. Because if you could take medicine now to save you if you had cancer, I don't think God's going to judge your heart on that, depending on how you feel about the decision you're going to make. Now,
or how you got that medicine.
Well, yeah, right. How you got the medicine, or what you had to do afterwards. Because I think that's ultimately why, in the first century, this mark of the beast would be like you have these early Christians who are waiting on Christ to return. And then it's like a denial of him coming back or his promise to you, because I'm going to worship the emperor because I'm trying to get bread. That makes sense to me, like why that would be such a heinous sin, because it's like you deny. Jesus says, don't worry about what you eat. Don't worry about what you'll wear. I clothe the flowers. I feed the birds. I care way more about you. And then you believe that you're going to starve. So you worship a false god or a man in order to get bread. I think that's why that was a damnable sin.
Well, on that note, JT, let our audience know where they can find you and what you've got coming up next.
Yeah, if you guys want to hear more, especially if you want to hear more about like the old world and Satan's Little Season, we kind of just scratched the surface. You can check out my YouTube channel, JT Follows JC. You can find me on pretty much every social media app, YouTube or TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I'm on X. You can find me on Apple or Spotify. You just look up JT's Mixtape. You can find me over there. But yeah, putting out content weekly, sometimes daily, depending on what I'm doing. But yeah, appreciate you guys having me on.
No, I appreciate you coming on, mate.
It's been a pleasure.
If you just hang on for 2 seconds after the credits roll on this, so we make sure your audio uploads to that'd be awesome.
Okay, sure.
Cheers, man. So yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks for coming. We'll see you all really soon. Ta-ra.
Bye-bye.